and welcome to the Deerfield Twitch channel. Welcome back to Lunchtime Listens. I'm Christina, and I'm joined here by not one, but two special guests.
I'm Zoe.
And I'm Jasmine.
Welcome. So, again, you're here for Lunchtime Listens, where we are currently reading The Fellowship of the Ring. And last week, we were, our chapter that we read, they were trying to make it up the mountain. Our group has set off on their quest, and they pretty much encountered like a terrible snowstorm. We find out that elves can actually walk on top of snow. Pretty cool. The hobbits also all had to like be carried through the snow because they were too small. It felt very strange reading about such a cold, snowy day on a really warm July day. Middle of July.
So hot.
Yes. Today is even hotter than last week.
Boy, is it.
All right. So this week we are reading Chapter 4, A Journey in the Dark. It was evening, and the gray light was again waning fast when they halted for the night. They were very weary. The mountains were veiled in deepening dusk, and the wind was cold. Gandalf spared them one more mouthful each of the Mirrivore of Rivendell. When they had eaten some food, he called a council. "We cannot, of course, go on again tonight," he said. "The attack on the Redhorn Gate has tired us out, and we must rest here for a while." "And then where are we to go?" asked Frodo. "We still have our journey and our errand before us," answered Gandalf. "We have no choice but to go on or to return to Rivendell." Pippin's face brightened visibly at the mere mention of return to Rivendell. Merry and Sam looked up hopefully, but Aragorn and Boromir made no sign. Frodo looked troubled. "I wish I was back there," he said, "but how can I return without shame? Unless there is indeed no other way, and we are already defeated?" "You are right, Frodo," said Gandalf. "To go back is to admit defeat, and face worse defeat to come. If we go back now, then the ring must remain there. We shall not be able to set out again. Then sooner or later Rivendell will be besieged, and after a brief and bitter time, it will be destroyed. The ring wraiths are deadly enemies, but they are only shadows yet of the power and terror they would possess if the ruling ring was on their master's hand again." "Then we must go on, if there is a way," said Frodo with a sigh. Sam sank back into gloom. "There is a way that we may attempt," said Gandalf. "I thought from the beginning, when first I considered this journey, that we should try it. But it is not a pleasant way, and I have not spoken of it to the company before. Aragorn was against it, until the pass over the mountains had at least been tried. If it is a worse road than the Redhorn Gate, then it must be evil indeed," said Merry. "But you had better tell us about it, and let us know the worst at once." "The road that I speak of leads to the mines of Moria," said Gandalf. Only Gimli lifted up his head. A smoldering fire was in his eyes. On all the others, a dread fell at the mention of that name. Even to the hobbits, it was a legend of vague fear. "The road may lead to Moria, but how can we hope that it will lead through Moria?" said Aragorn darkly. "It is a name of ill omen," said Boromir, "nor do I see the need to go there. If we cannot cross the mountains, let us journey southwards until we come to the Gap of Rohan, where men are friendly to my people, taking the road that I followed on my way hither. Or we might pass by and cross the Isen into Langstrand and Lebanon." I'm doing my best. Sounds good, right?
Sounds good, babe. I know where we're going.
and so come to Gondor from the regions nigh to the sea. "Things have changed since you came north, Boromir," answered Gandalf. "Did you not hear what I told you of Saruman? With him I may have business of my own ere all this is over. But the ring must not come near Isengard, if that can by any means be prevented. The Gap of Rohan is closed to us while we go with the bearer. As for the longer road, we cannot afford the time. We might spend a year in such a journey, and we should pass through many lands that are empty and harborless. Yet they would not be safe. The watchful eyes both of Saruman and of the enemy are on them. When you came north, Boromir, you were in the enemy's eyes only one stray wanderer from the south, and a matter of small concern to him. His mind was busy with the pursuit of the ring. But you return now as a member of the ring's company, and you are in peril as long as you remain with us. The danger will increase with every league that we go south under the naked sky. Since our open attempt on the mountain pass, our plight has become more desperate, I fear. I see now little hope if we do not soon vanish from sight for a while and cover our trail. Therefore, I advise that we should go neither over the mountains nor around them, but under them. That is a road, at any rate, that the enemy will least expect us to take. I almost said like anemone. The anemone, the enemy. We do not know what he expects, said Boromir. He may watch all roads, likely and unlikely. In that case, to enter Moria would be to walk into a trap, hardly better than knocking at the gates of the Dark Tower itself. The name of Moria is Black. You speak of what you do not know when you liken Moria to the stronghold of Sauron, answered Gandalf. I alone of you have ever been in the dungeons of the Dark Lord, and only in his older and lesser dwelling, in Dol Guldur. Those who pass the gates of Barad-dûr do not return. But I would not lead you into Moria if there were no hope of coming out again. If there are orcs there, it may prove ill for us, that is true. But most of the orcs of the Misty Mountains were scattered or destroyed in the Battle of Five Armies. The Eagles report that orcs are gathering again from afar, but there is a hope that Moria is still free. He doesn't seem that certain.
No.
He's like, we're going to be fine. There's a chance we're not going to be fine, but we'll be fine.
And I was gonna say after The Hobbit, I don't know how much stock I put into these eagles. I'm just saying.
We're gonna be fine.
He's like, we're not going to be fine. We might not be fine. There is even a chance that dwarves are there, and that in some deep hall of his fathers, Balin, son of Fundin, may be found. However, it may prove one must tread the path that need chooses. I will tread the path with you, Gandalf, said Gimli. I will go and look on the halls of Durin, whatever may wait there, if you can find the doors that are shut. Good, Gimli, said Gandalf. You encourage me. Don't encourage him. We will seek the hidden doors together, and we will come through. In the ruins of the dwarves, a dwarf's head will be less easy to bewilder than elves or men or hobbits. Yet it will not be the first time that I have been to Moria. I sought there long for Thrain, son of Thror, after he was lost. I passed through, and I came out again alive. I too once passed the Dimmeril Gate, said Aragorn quietly. But though I also came out again, the memory is very evil. I do not wish to enter Moria a second time. And I don't wish to enter it even once, said Pippin. Nor me, muttered Sam. Of course not, said Gandalf. Who would? But the question is, who will follow me if I lead you there? I will, said Gimli eagerly. I will, said Aragorn heavily. You followed my lead almost to disaster in the snow, and have said no word of blame. I will follow your lead now. If this last warning does not move you, it is not of the ring, nor of us, others that I am thinking now, but of you, Gandalf. And I say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware. I will not go, said Boromir. Not unless the vote of the whole company is against me. What do Legolas and the little folk say? The ring-bearer's voice surely should be heard. I do not wish to go to Moria, said Legolas. The hobbits said nothing. Sam looked at Frodo. At last Frodo spoke. I do not wish to go, he said, but neither do I wish to refuse the advice of Gandalf. I beg that there should be no vote until we have slept on it. Gandalf will get votes easier in the light of the morning than in this cold gloom. How the wind howls. At these words, all fell into silent thought. They heard the wind hissing among the rocks and trees, and there was a howling and wailing around them in the empty spaces of the night. Suddenly, Aragorn leapt to his feet. How the wind howls, he cried. It is howling with wolf voices. The wargs have come west of the mountains. Need we wait until morning then, said Gandalf. It is as I said, the hunt is up. Even if we live to see the dawn, who now will wish to journey south by night with the wild wolves on his trail? How far is Moria? Asked Boromir. There was a door southwest of Caradhras, some 15 miles as the crow flies, and maybe 20 as the wolf runs, answered Gandalf grimly. What kind of, estimate is that?
Seems very vague.
15 miles if the crow is flying, 20 if the wolf is running. All right, Gandalf.
My brother in Christ, you're just making up numbers.
17 if it's in an Uber. Come on.
I'm gonna need my Google Maps for this. Then let us start start as soon as it's light tomorrow if we can, said Boromir. The wolf that one hears is worse than the orc that one fears. I'm going to have that as my motto. The wolf that one hears is worse than the orc that one fears. True, said Aragorn, loosening his sword in its sheath. But where the warg howls, there also the orc prowls. Look at these rhymes. Good on you guys. Poetry. I wish I had taken Elrond's advice, muttered Pippin to Sam. I am no good after all. There is not enough of the breed of Bandabras, the bull roarer in me. These howls freeze my blood. I don't ever remember feeling so wretched. My heart's right down in my toes, Mr. Pippin, said Sam, but we aren't eaten yet, and there are some stout folk here with us. Whatever may be in store for old Gandalf, I'll wager it isn't a wolf's belly. For their defense in the night, the company climbed to the top of the small hill under which they had been sheltering. It was crowned with a knot of old and twisted trees, about which lay a broken circle of boulder stones. In the midst of this, they lit a fire, for there was no hope that darkness and silence would keep their trail from discovery by the hunting packs. Round the fire they sat, and those that were not on guard dozed uneasily. Poor Bill the pony trembled and sweated where he stood. The howling of the wolves was now all around them, sometimes nearer and sometimes further off. In the dead of night, many shining eyes were seen peering over the brow of the hill. Some advanced almost to the ring of stones. At a gap in the circle, a great dark wolf shape could be seen halted, gazing at them. A shuddering howl broke from him, as if he were a captain summoning his pack to the assault. Gandalf stood up and strode forward, holding his staff aloft. Listen, hound of Sauron, he cried. Gandalf is here. Fly if you value your foul skin. I will shrivel you from tail to snout if you come within this ring. The wolf snarled and sprang towards them with a great leap. At that moment there was a sharp twang. Legolas had loosed his bow. There was a hideous yell, and the leaping shape thudded to the ground. The elvish arrow had pierced its throat. The watching eyes were suddenly extinguished. Gandalf and Aragorn strode forward, but the hill was deserted. The hunting packs had fled. All about them the darkness grew silent, and no cry came on the sighing wind.
I completely forgot Bill the pony was with me. And my heart goes out to Bill.
Anne also really loves Bill. I just think Bill is, all these names, and Bill is such like a,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Sam
Legolas, like all this whatever, and then Bill.
Bill.
Well, it's kind of like in Dune. It's
Oh,
Paul.
that's right. Oh my gosh, all these like funky names, hard to pronounce names, and Paul.
And Duncan. I'm like, okay.
Alright.
Bill.
Duncan's like a kid that like you grew up with when you
Yeah.
was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
Not like an actual like
Not like a mercenary. This is my bodyguard, Duncan.
I feel the same with Cody. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Signs Duncan's, Cody's, Bill's, and Paul's.
But
No
also,
offense was intended.
I feel like ponies, like horses, they always have like kind of like fun, funky names. Bill for a pony seems so
Yeah,
funny.
right?
You know, it's usually like Gumdrop, the pony. Bill. Billiam.
Not William.
His real name's Billiam.
Bilious.
Billious. The night was old, and westward the waning moon was setting, gleaming fitfully through the breaking clouds. Suddenly, Frodo started from sleep. Without warning, a storm of howls broke out, fierce and wild, all about the camp. A great host of wargs. Do you guys know what a warg is?
Yes.
I don't think I do. What is it?
It's like a worm. It's like
Thanks. I get it.
I'm sorry, that was like super clear. No, it's like so to me, whenever
Yeah.
I would read these and
Yeah.
the wargs, similarly to the orcs before I saw
Yeah.
like the Lord of the Rings movies,
Yeah.
the Hobbit movies, in my head, I kind of always just pictured like a big amorphous dog.
Okay, that's kind of what I'm picturing
Like a
too.
dangerous dog, saber-toothed tiger,
Maybe like mutated.
mesh. Something deadly, large, you don't want it.
Cool. Okay. I was just like, have I missed this? Like, I don't remember like what a warg is supposed to look like. A great host of wargs had gathered silently and was now attacking them from every side at once. Fling fuel on the fire, cried Gandalf to the hobbits. Draw your blades and stand back to back. In the leaping light, as the fresh wood blazed up, Frodo saw many gray shapes spring over the ring of stones. More and more followed. Through the throat of one huge leader, Aragorn passed his sword with a thrust. With a great sweep, Boromir hewed the head off another. Beside them, Gimli stood with his stout legs apart, wielding his dwarf axe. The bow of Legolas was singing. In the wavering firelight, Gandalf seemed suddenly to grow. He rose up, a great menacing shape, like the monument of some ancient king of stone set upon a hill. Stooping like a cloud, he lifted a burning branch and strode to meet the wolves. They gave back before him. High in the air he tossed the blazing brand. It flared with a sudden white radiance like lightning, and his voice rolled like thunder. Oh no, here's the Elvish.
Believe me.
Disclaimer, this is probably totally wrong. Naur an edreth amen, Naur dan e nogoroth, he cried. There was a roar and a crackle, and the tree above him burst into a leaf and bloom of blinding flame. The fire leapt from treetop to treetop. The whole hill was crowned with dazzling light. The swords and knives of the defenders shone and flickered. The last arrow of Legolas kindled in the air as it flew, and plunged burning into the heart of a great wolf chieftain. All the others fled. Slowly the fire died till nothing was left but falling ash and sparks. A bitter smoke curled above the burned tree stumps and blew darkly from the hill. As the first light of dawn came dimly in the sky, their enemies were routed and did not return. "What did I tell you, Mr. Pippin?" said Sam, sheathing his sword. "Wolves won't get him. That was an eye-opener and no mistake. Nearly cinched the hair off my head." When the full light of the morning came, no signs of the wolves were to be found, and they looked in vain for the bodies of the dead. No trace of the fight remained but the charred trees and the arrows of Legolas lying on the hilltop. All were undamaged, save one of which only the point was left. "It is as I feared," said Gandalf. "These were no ordinary wolves hunting for food in the wilderness. Let us eat quickly and go." That day, the weather changed again, almost as if it was at the command of some power and had no longer any use for snow, since they had retreated from the pass. A power that wished now to have a clear light in which things that moved in the wild could be seen from far away. The wind had been turning through north to northwest during the night, and now it failed. The clouds vanished southwards, and the sky was opened, high and blue. As they stood upon the hillside, ready to depart, a pale sunlight gleamed over the mountaintops. "We must reach the doors before sunset," said Gandalf, "or I fear we shall not reach them at all. It is not far, but our path may be winding, for here Aragorn cannot guide us. He has seldom walked in this country, and only once have I been under the west wall of Moria, and that was long ago." "There it lies," he said, pointing away southeastwards to where the mountain's sides fell sheer into the shadows at their feet. In the distance could be dimly seen a line of bare cliffs, and in their midst, taller than the rest, one great gray wall. "When we left the pass, I led you southwards, and not back to our starting point, as some of you may have noticed. It is well that I did so, for now we have several miles left to cross, and haste is needed. Let us go." "I do not know which to hope," said Boromir grimly, "that Gandalf will find what he seeks, or that coming to the cliff we shall find the gates lost forever. All choices seem ill, and to be caught between wolves and the wall, the likeliest chance. Lead on." Gimli now walked ahead by the wizard's side, so eager was he to come to Moria. Together they led the company back towards the mountains. The only road of Old to Moria from the west had lain along the course of a stream, the Sirinon, that ran from the feet of the cliffs near where the doors had stood. But either Gandalf was astray, or else the land had changed in recent years, for he did not strike the stream where he looked to find it, only a few miles southwards from their start. The morning was passing towards noon, and still the company wandered and scrambled in a barren country of red stones. Nowhere could they see any gleam of water or hear any sound of it. All was bleak and dry. Their hearts sank. They saw no living thing, and not a bird was in the sky. But what the night would bring, if it caught them in that lost land, none of them cared to think. Suddenly, Gimli, who had pressed on ahead, called back to them. He was standing on a knoll and pointing to the right. Hurrying up, they saw below them a deep and narrow channel. It was empty and silent, and hardly a trickle of water flowed among the brown and red-stained stones of its bed. But on the near side there was a path, much broken and decayed, that wound its way among the ruined walls and paving stones of an ancient highroad. "Ah, here it is at last," said Gandalf. "This is where the stream ran. Siranon, the Gate Stream, they used to call it. But what has happened to the water? I cannot guess. Climate change. I used to be swift and noisy. Come, we must hurry on. We are late." The company were footsore and tired, but they trudged doggedly along the rough and winding track for many miles. The sun turned from the noon and began to go west. After a brief halt and a hasty meal, they went on again. Before them the mountains frowned, but their path lay in a deep trough of land, and they could see only the higher shoulders and the far eastward peaks. At length they came to a sharp bend, where there the road, which had been veering southwards between the brink of the channel and a steep fall of the land to the left, turned and went due east again. Rounding the corner, they saw before them a low cliff, some 5 fathoms high, with a broken and jagged top. Over it a trickling water dripped through a wide cleft that seemed to have been carved out by a fall that had once been strong and full. "Indeed, things have changed," said Gandalf, "but there is no mistaking the place. There is all that remains of the stair falls. If I remember right, there was a flight of steps cut into the rock at their side, but the main road wound away left and climbed with several loops up to the level ground at the top. There used to be a shallow valley beyond the falls, right up to the walls of Moria, and the Siranon flowed through it with the road beside it. Let us go and see what things are like now." They found the stone steps without difficulty, and Gimli sprang swiftly up them, followed by Gandalf and Frodo. When they reached the top, they saw that they could go no further that way, and the reason for the drying up of the Gate Stream was revealed. Not climate change? ? Behind them... Geology. Before them... More ontology? Before them stretched a dark, still lake. Neither sky nor sunset was reflected on its sullen surface. The Siranon had been dammed and had filled all the valley. Beyond the ominous water were reared vast cliffs, their stern faces pallid in the fading light, final and impassable. No sign of gate or entrance, not a fissure or crack could Frodo see in the frowning stone. "There are the walls of Moria," said Gandalf, pointing across the water, "and there the gate stood once upon a time, the elven door at the end of the road from Holland, by which we have come. But this way is blocked. None of the company, I guess, will wish to swim this gloomy water at the end of the day. It has an unwholesome look." "We must find a way round the northern edge," said Gimli. "The first thing for the company to do is to climb up by the main path and see where that will lead us. Even if there was no lake, we could not get our baggage pony up this stair." Yeah, don't forget about Bill.
His name is Bill.
Rude, Gimli. Forgetting his name. "But in any case, we cannot take the poor beast into the mines," said Gandalf. "The road under the mountains is a dark road, and there are places narrow and steep which he cannot tread, even if we can." "Poor old Bill," said Frodo. "I had not thought of that. And poor Sam." They're like best buds, Bill and Sam.
That's his horse. Or pony.
Pony.
Sorry.
Wow.
They also both have 2 basic names.
Sorry, Bill. Sorry, Sam.
Sorry. I wonder what he will say. "I am sorry," said Gandalf. "Poor Bill has been a useful companion, and it goes to my heart to turn him adrift now. I would have traveled lighter and brought no animal, least of all this one that Sam is fond of." They're just gonna abandon him?
Yeah, I know.
"If I had had my way, I feared all along that we should be obliged to take this road." I don't know, Gandalf. I think you could have said something like, "Hey, Sam, I know you and Bill are close and you don't want to be parted, but maybe he should chill here until we return."
I just have a lot of opinions about Bill.
Well, this is the platform to
No.
speak on them.
No, it's not. I'm very anti-Gandalf.
I think I am too.
It's true.
Yeah. We should do check in for our spin-off episode where Jasmine goes on
Talking Gandalf.
a special episode.
Everything
A very
Gandalf has
special
done
episode
wrong.
With 90s graphics.
Oh my god. And we have microphones where a newscaster is
This is welcome to the roast of Gandalf.
oh my gosh. If for nothing else, it's this moment. Bill deserved better. The day was drawing to its end, and cold stars were glinting in the sky high above the sunset, when the company, with all the speed they could, climbed up the slopes and reached the side of the lake. In breadth, it looked to be no more than 2 or 3 furlongs at the widest point. How far it stretched away southward, they could not see in the failing light, but its northern end was no more than half a mile from where they stood, and between the stony ridges that enclosed the valley and the water's edge, there was a rim of open ground. They hurried forward, for they had still a mile or 2 to go before they could reach the point on the far shore that Gandalf was making for. And then he had still to find the doors. When they came to the northernmost corner of the lake, they found a narrow creek that barred their way. It was green and stagnant, thrust out like a slimy arm towards the enclosing hills. Gimli strode forward, undeterred, and found that the water was shallow, no more than ankle deep at the edge. Behind him, they walked in a file, threading their way with care, for under the weedy pools were sliding and greasy stones, and footing was treacherous. Frodo shuddered with disgust at the touch of the dark, unclean water on his feet. Well, maybe, Frodo, that's why you should wear shoes.
I don't think they had flip-flops. Like
I don't think-
water shoes.
I mean, I don't think
clogs,
the hobbits do they ever wear shoes?
boots.
Just imagine if they had Crocs.
Oh my
In
god.
sport
Put
mode.
them in sport mode. That's where you put the ring. Attach it to a gibbet.
No! Oh, what's that cool gibbet you've got, Frodo?
That's the one ring to rule them all.
Oh, cool. Where'd you get it?
The outlet store.
Special edition. Okay, now they need to make like Lord of the Rings props.
They probably
They
are.
probably do.
Yeah, look it up.
Croc sponsorship to your Library.
Sponsor us, Crocs. There better be a bill gibbet. Gibbet.
Oh
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Bill.
As Sam, the last of the company, led Bill up onto the dry ground on the far side, there came a soft sound, a swish, followed by a plop, as if a fish had disturbed the still surface of the water. Turning quickly, they saw ripples, black edged with shadow in the waning light. Great rings were widening outwards from a point far out in the lake. There was a bubbling noise, and then silence. The dusk deepened, and the last gleams of the sunset were veiled in cloud. Gandalf now pressed on at a great pace, and the others followed as quickly as they could. They reached the strip of dry land between the lake and the cliffs. It was narrow, often hardly a dozen yards across, and encumbered with fallen rocks and stones. But they found a way, hugging the cliff and keeping as far from the dark water as they might. A mile southwards along the shore, they came upon holly trees. Stumps and dead boughs were rotting in the shallows, the remains, it seemed, of old thickets, or of a hedge that had once lined the road across the drowned valley. But close under the cliff there stood, still strong and living, 2 tall trees, larger than any trees of holly that Frodo had ever seen or imagined. Their great roots spread from the wall to the water. Under the looming cliffs, they had looked like mere bushes when seen far off from the top of the stair, but now they towered overhead, stiff, dark, and silent, throwing deep night shadows about their feet, standing like sentinel pillars at the end of the road. "Well, here we are at last," said Gandalf. "Here the elven way from Holland ended. Holly was the token of the people of that land, and they planted it here to mark the end of their domain. For the west door was made chiefly for their use in their traffic with the lords of Moria. Those were happier days, when there was still close friendship at times between folk of different race, even dwarves and elves." "It was not the fault of the dwarves that the friendship waned," said Gimli. "I have not heard that it was the fault of the elves," said Legolas. "I have heard both," said Gandalf, "and I will not give judgment now. But I beg you two, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends, and to help me. I need you both. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand." Turning to the others, he said, "While I am searching, will you each make ready to enter the mines? For here I fear we must say farewell to our good beast of burden. You must lay aside much of the stuff that we brought against bitter weather. You will not need it inside, nor our hope when we come through and journey on down into the south. Instead, each of us must take a share of what the pony carried, especially the food and the water skins. But you can't leave poor old Bill behind in this forsaken place, Mr. Gandalf, cried Sam, angry and distressed. I won't have it, and that's flat, after he has come so far and all. I mean, seriously. I am sorry, Sam, said the wizard, but when the door opens, I do not think you will be able to drag your Bill inside into the long dark of Moria. You will have to choose between Bill and your master. He'd follow Mr. Frodo into a dragon's den if I let him, protested Sam. It'd be nothing short of murder to turn him loose with all these wolves about. It will be short of murder, I hope, said Gandalf. He laid his hand on the pony's head and spoke in a low voice. Go with the words of guard and guiding on you, he said. You are a wise beast and have learned much in Rivendell. Make your ways to places where you can find grass and so come in time to Elrond's house or wherever you wish to go. There, Sam. He will have quite as much chance of escaping wolves and getting home as we have. Sam stood sullenly but he's like by himself though. Like if they all went, like they're all together, you know, like Gandalf, that's not equal. It's not mathing out. The math ain't mathing.
Like, no wonder it took them so long. Like, no wonder this is all taking so long.
I would have been out day one.
Exactly.
I'd be like, how dare you invite me even on this trip?
If Bill...
How dare you invite me?
Let me just say, if Bill would have been with Bilbo Baggins during The Hobbit, that trip would have taken like 3 days.
Exactly.
Bill, the real MVP. Sam stood sullenly by the pony and returned no answer. Bill, seeming to understand well what was going on, nuzzled up to him, putting his nose to Sam's ear. Sam burst into tears and fumbled with the straps, unlading all the pony's packs and throwing them on the ground. The others sorted out the goods, making a pile of all that could be left behind and dividing up the rest. When this was done, they turned to watch Gandalf. He appeared to have done nothing. Wow. He was standing between the two trees, gazing at the blank wall of the cliff as if he would bore a hole into it with his eyes. Gimli was wandering about, tapping the stone here and there with his axe. Legolas was pressed against the rock as if listening. I'm just imagining this. It just seems so like, are you guys doing anything? What are they doing? Well, here we are, and all ready, said Mary. But where are the doors? I can't see any sign of them. Dwarf doors are not made to be seen when shut, said Gimli. They are invisible, and their own masters cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten. But this door was not made to be a secret known only to dwarves, said Gandalf, coming suddenly to life and turning around. Unless things are altogether changed, eyes that know what to look for may discover the signs.
He walked forward to the wall. Right between the shadow of the trees there was a smooth space, and over this he passed his hands to and fro, muttering words under his breath. Then he stepped back. Look, he said, can you see anything now? The moon now shone upon the gray face of the rock, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then slowly on the surface, where the wizard's hands had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running in the stone. At first there were no more than pale gossamer threads, so fine that they only twinkled fitfully where the moon caught them. But steadily they grew broader and clearer until their design could be guessed. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, was an arch of interlacing letters and an elvish character. Below, though the threads were in places blurred or broken, the outline could be seen of an anvil and a hammer surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these again were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. There are the emblems of Durin, cried Gimli. And there is the tree of the high elves, said Legolas. And there, the star of the house of Fëanor, said Gandalf. They are wrought of Ithilden that mirrors only starlight and moonlight, and sleeps until it is touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten in Middle-earth. It is long since I heard them, and I thought deeply before I could recall them to my mind. What does the writing say? Asked Frodo. who was trying to decipher the inscription on the arch. "I thought I knew the elf letters, but I cannot read these." "The words are in the elven tongue of the west of Middle-earth in the elder days," answered Gandalf. "But they do not say anything of importance to us. They say only, 'The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak, friend, and enter.' And then underneath, small and faint, is written, 'I, Narvi, made them. Celembrimor of Holland drew these signs.'" "What does it mean by 'speak, friend, and enter'?" said Merry. "That is plain enough," said Gimli. "If you are a friend, speak the password, and the doors will open, and you can enter." "Yes," said Gandalf, "these doors are probably governed by words. Some dwarf gates will open only at special times or for particular reasons, and some have locks and keys that are still needed when all necessary times and words are known. These doors have no key. In the days of Durin, they were not secret. They usually stood open and door wards sat there, but if they were shut, any who knew the opening word could speak it and pass in. At least it is so recorded. But is it not, Gimli?" "It is," said the dwarf, but what the word is not remembered. Narvi and his craft and all his kindred have vanished from the earth." "But do you know the word, Gandalf?" asked Boromir in surprise. "No," said the wizard. The others...
Of course not!
I'm telling you, Gandalf. The others looked dismayed. Only Aragorn, who knew Gandalf well, remained silent and unmoved. "Then what was the use of bringing us to this accursed spot?" cried Boromir, glancing back with a shudder at the dark water. You told us that you had once passed through the mines. How could that be if you did not know how to enter?" "The answer to your first question, Boromir," said the wizard, "is that I do not know the word yet. But we shall soon see." And he added with a glint in his eyes under their bristling brows, "You may ask, what is the use of my deeds when they are proved useless? As for your other question, do you doubt my tale? Or have you no wits left? I did not enter this way. I came from the east. If you wish to know, I will tell you that these doors open outward." There's the illustration of the doors. "From the inside, you may thrust them open with your hands. From the outside, nothing will move them, save the spell of command. They cannot be forced inward." "What are you going to do then?" asked Pippin, undaunted by the wizard's bristling brows. "I have a question. Is Sam crying over Bill this entire time?"
Probably.
Like, the entire time they're having this conversation, he's just over there weeping over his pony.
Probably, wouldn't you be?
I mean, yeah.
I think Sam has a lot of feelings, okay? He's like a deep soul. He's not gonna just be like, "Oh well, bye Bill."
"Bye, Bill." "Knock on the doors with your head, Peregrine Took," said Gandalf. "But if that does not shatter them, and I am allowed a little peace from foolish questions, I will seek for the opening words. I once knew every spell in all the tongues of elves or men or orcs that was ever used for such a purpose. I can still remember 10 score of them without searching in my mind, but only a few trials, I think, will be needed. And I shall not have to call on Gimli for words of the secret dwarf tongue that they teach to no one. The opening words were elvish, like the writing on the arch, that seems certain." He stepped up to the rock again and lightly touched with his staff the silver star in the middle beneath each sign of the anvil. "Anan Eldhen Edro he Amnin, Fennis Nogothrim Lasso Beth Lamnin," he said in a commanding voice. The silver lines faded, but the blank gray stone did not stir. Many times he repeated these words in different order or varied them. Then he tried other spells, one after another, speaking now faster and louder, now soft and slow. Then he spoke many single words of elvish speech. Nothing happened. The cliff towered into the night. The countless stars were kindled. The wind blew cold, and the door stood fast.
Gandalf reminds me of, like, you know, when people are like, "Oh yeah, I took high school Spanish," or like, "I know it," and they're like in like shows all the time. They're like piecing together these random words, and it's like,
Or they're just asking where the bathroom is.
yeah.
Yeah. Again, Gandalf approached the wall, and lifting up his arms, he spoke in tones of command and rising wrath. "Edro! Edro!" he cried, and struck the rock with his staff. "Open! Open!" he shouted, and followed it with the same command in every language that has ever been spoken in the west of Middle-earth.
That'd be too easy, Gandalf.
Then he threw his staff on the ground and sat down in silence. At that moment, from far off, the wind bore to their listening ears the howling of wolves. Bill the pony started in fear, and Sam sprang to his side and whispered softly to him. "Do not let him run away," said Boromir. "It seems that we shall need him still. If the wolves do not find us, how I hate this foul pool." He stopped, picking up a large stone. He cast it far into the dark water. The stone vanished with a soft slap, but at the same instant there was a swish and a bubble. Great rippling rings formed on the surface, out beyond where the stone had fallen, and they moved slowly towards the foot of the cliff. "Why did you do that, Boromir?" said Frodo. "I hate this place too, and I am afraid. I don't know what of, not wolves or the dark behind the doors, but of something else. I'm afraid of the pool. Don't disturb it." "I wish we could get away," said Merry. "Why doesn't Gandalf do something quick?" said Pippin. Gandalf took no notice of them. He sat with his head bowed, either in despair or in anxious thought. The mournful howling of the wolves was heard again. The ripples on the water grew and came closer. Some were already lapping on the shore. With a suddenness that startled them all, the wizard sprang to his feet. He was laughing. "I have it! Of course, absurdly simple, like most riddles when you see the answer." Picking up his staff, he stood before the rock and said in a clear voice, "Melon." The star shone out briefly and faded again. Then, silently, a great door was outlined, though not a crack or a joint had been visible before. Slowly it divided in the middle and swung outward inch by inch, until both doors lay back against the wall. Through the opening, a shadowy stair could be seen climbing steeply up, but beyond the lower steps, the darkness was deeper than the night. The company stared in wonder. "I was wrong after all," said Gandalf, and Gimli too. Merry, of all people, was right on track. The opening word was inscribed on the archway all the time. The translation should have been, "Say, friend, and enter." I had only to speak the Elvish word for friend, and the doors opened. Quite simple. Too simple for a learned lore master in these suspicious days. Those were happier times. Now let us go. He strode forward and set his foot on the lowest step, but at that moment several things happened. Frodo felt something seize him by the ankle, and he fell with a cry. Bill the pony gave a wild neigh of fear and turned tail and dashed away along the lakeside into the darkness. Sam leapt after him, and then hearing Frodo's cry, he ran back again, weeping and cursing. The others swung around and saw the waters of the lake seething, as if a host of snakes were swimming up from the southern end. Out from the water, a long, sinuous tentacle had crawled. It was pale green and luminous and wet. Its fingered end had hold of Frodo's foot and was dragging him into the water. Sam, on his knees, was now slashing at it with a knife. The arm let go of Frodo, and Sam pulled him away, crying out for help. 20 other arms came rippling out, the dark water boiled, and there was a hideous stench. "Into the gateway, up the stairs, quick!" shouted Gandalf, leaping back, rousing them from the horror that seemed to have rooted all but Sam to the ground where they stood. He drove them forward. They were in just in time. Sam and Frodo were only a few steps up, and Gandalf had just begun to climb, when the groping tentacles writhed across the narrow shore and fingered the cliff walls and the door. One came wriggling over the threshold, glistening in the starlight. Gandalf turned and paused. If he was considering what word would close the gate again from within, there was no need. Many coiling arms seized the doors on either side, and with a horrible strength swung them round. With a shattering echo, they slammed, and all light was lost. A noise of rending and crashing came dully through the ponderous stone. Sam, clinging to Frodo's arm, collapsed on a step in the black darkness. "Poor old Bill," he said in a choking voice. "Poor old Bill. Wolves and snakes, but the snakes were too much for him. I had to choose, Mr. Frodo. I had to come and get you." They heard Gandalf go back down the steps and thrust his staff against the doors. There was a quiver in the stone, and the stairs trembled, but the doors did not open. "Well, well," said the wizard. "The passage is blocked behind us now." "And there is only one way out on the other side of the mountains. I fear from the sounds that the boulders have been piled up and the trees uprooted and thrown across the gate. I'm so sorry, for the trees were beautiful and had stood for so long." "What about Bill?" "I felt that something horrible was near from the moment that my foot first touched the water," said Frodo. What was that thing, or were there many of them?" "I do not know," answered Gandalf. "But the arms were all guided by one purpose. Something has crept or has been driven out of the dark waters under the mountains. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world." He did not speak aloud his thought that whatever it was that dwelt in the lake, it had seized on Frodo first among all the company. Boromir muttered under his breath, but the echoing stone magnified the sound to a hoarse whisper that all could hear. In the deep places of the world, and thither we are going against my wish. Who will lead us now in this deadly dark? I will, said Gandalf, and Gimli shall walk with me. Follow my staff. As the wizard passed on ahead up the great steps, he held his staff aloft, and from its tip there came a faint radiance. The wide stairway was sound and undamaged. 200 steps they counted, broad and shallow, and at the top they found an arched passage with a level floor leading on into the dark. Let us sit and rest and have something to eat here on the landing, since we can't find a dining room, said Frodo. He had begun to shake off the terror of the clutching arm, and suddenly he felt extremely hungry. The proposal was welcomed by all, and they all sat on the upper steps, dim figures in the gloom. After they had eaten, Gandalf gave them each a third sip of the Mirror of Rivendell. It will not last much longer, I'm afraid, he said, but I think we need it after the horror at the gate, and unless we have great luck, we shall need all that is left before we see the other side. Go carefully with the water, too. There are many streams and wells in the mines, but they should not be touched. We may not have a chance of filling our skins in bottles till we come down into Dimril Dale. How long is that going to take us? Said Frodo. I cannot say, answered Gandalf. It depends on many chances, but going straight without mishap or losing our way, we shall take 3 or 4 marches, I expect. It cannot be less than 40 miles from West Door to East Gate in a direct line, and the road may wind much. After only a brief rest, they started on their way again. All were eager to get the journey over as quickly as possible, and were willing, tired as they were, to go marching still for several hours. Gandalf walked in front, as before. In his left hand he held up his glimmering staff, the light of which just showed the ground before his feet. In his right he held his sword, Glamdring. Behind him came Gimli, his eyes glinting in the dim light, as he turned his head from side to side. Behind the dwarf walked Frodo, and he had drawn the short sword Sting. No gleam came from the blade of Sting or of Glamdring, and that was some comfort, for, being the work of elvish smiths in the elder days, these swords shone with a cold light if any orcs were near at hand. Behind Frodo went Sam, and after him Legolas and the young hobbits, and Boromir. In the dark at the rear, grim and silent, walked Aragorn. The passage twisted around a few times, and then began to descend. It went steadily down for a long while before it became level once again. The air grew hot and stifling, but it was not foul, and at times they felt currents of cooler air upon their faces, issuing from half-guessed openings in the walls. There were many of these. In the pale ray of the wizard's staff, Frodo caught glimpses of stairs and arches, and of other passages and tunnels, sloping up or running steeply down or opening blankly dark on either side. It was bewildering beyond hope of remembering. Gimli aided Gandalf very little, except by his stout courage. At least he was not, as were most of the others, troubled by the mere darkness in itself. Often the wizard consulted him at points where the choice of way was doubtful, but it was always Gandalf who had the final word. The mines of Moria were vast and intricate beyond the imagination of Gimli, Gloin's son, dwarf of the mountain race though he was. To Gandalf, the far-off memories of the journey long before were now of little help. But even in the gloom, and despite all windings of the road, he knew whither he wished to go, and he did not falter as long as there was a path that led towards his goal. Do not be afraid, said Aragorn. There was a pause longer than usual, and Gandalf and Gimli were whispering together. The others were crowded behind, waiting anxiously. Do not be afraid. I have been with him on many a journey. It was never on one so dark, and there are tales of Rivendell of greater deeds of his than any I have seen. He will not go astray if there is any path to find. He has led us in here against our fears, but he will lead us out again, and at whatever cost to himself. He is surer of finding the way home in a blind night than the cats of Queen Beruthiel. It was well for the company that they had such a guide. They had no field, nor any means of making torches. In the desperate scramble at the doors, many things had been left behind, but without any light, they would soon have come to grief. There were not only many roads to choose from, there were also, in many places, holes and pitfalls and dark wells beside the path in which their passing feet echoed. There were fissures and chasms in the walls and floor, and every now and then a crack would open right before their feet. The widest was more than 7 feet across, and it was long before Pippin could summon enough courage to leap over the dreadful gap. The noise of churning water came from far below, as if some great mill wheel was turning in the depths. "Rope," muttered Sam. "I knew I'd want it if I hadn't gotten it." Yeah, I'm a second guesser. I'm like, oh, I don't need that, and then I immediately need something.
Yeah, to be fair, he forgot and then thought about it, but then there was no time to go back in to get it.
That's fair.
Yeah. So he did kind of remember.
Always at the inopportune moment.
Right. But I do think he could have been hold up, guys. I forgot
this rope.
Yeah.
Yeah. As these dangers became more frequent in their march, and their march became slower, already they seemed to have been tramping on, endlessly to the mountain's roots. They were more than weary, and yet there seemed no comfort in the thought of halting anywhere. Frodo's spirits had risen for a while after his escape, and after food and a draught of the cordial, but now a deep uneasiness, growing to dread, crept over him again. Though he had been healed in Rivendell of the knife stroke, that grim wound had not been without effect. His senses were sharper and more aware of things that could not be seen. One sign of the change that he had soon noticed was that he could see more in the dark than any of his companions, save perhaps Gandalf. And he was in any case the bearer of the ring. It hung upon its chain against his breast, and at whiles it seemed a heavy weight. He felt the certainty of evil ahead and of evil following, but he said nothing. He gripped tighter on the hilts of his sword and went on doggedly. The company behind him spoke seldom, and then only in hurried whispers. There was no sound but the sound of their own feet, the dull stump of Gimli's dwarf boots, and the heavy tread of Boromir, the light step of Legolas, the soft, scarce heard patter of hobbit feet, and in the rear the slow, firm footfalls of Aragorn with his long stride. When they halted for a moment, they heard nothing at all, unless it were occasionally a faint trickle and drip of unseen water. Yet Frodo began to hear, or to imagine, that he heard something else, like the faint fall of soft bare feet. It was never loud enough or near enough for him to feel certain that he heard it, but once it had started, it had never stopped. Well, the company was moving, but it was not an echo, for when they halted, it pattered on for a little all by itself, and then grew still. It was after nightfall when they entered the mines. They had been going for several hours with only brief halts, when Gandalf came to his first serious check. Before him stood a wide, dark arch opening into 3 passages, all led in the same general direction, eastward, but the left-hand passage plunged down, while the right-hand climbed up, and the middle way seemed to run on, smooth and level, but very narrow. "I have no memory of this place at all," said Gandalf, standing uncertainly under the arch. He held up his staff in hope of finding some marks or inscription that might help his choice, but nothing of the kind was to be seen. "I'm too weary to decide," he said, shaking his head, "and I expect that you are all as weary as I am, or wearier. We had better halt here for what is left of the night. You know what I mean. In here it is ever dark, but outside the late moon is riding westward, and the middle night has passed." "Poor old Bill," said Sam. "I wonder where he is. I hope those wolves haven't gotten to him yet." To the left of the great arch they found a stone door. It was half closed, but swung back easily to a gentle thrust. Beyond there seemed to lie a wide chamber cut in the rock. "Steady, steady," cried Gandalf as Merry and Pippin pushed forward, glad to find a place where they could rest with at least more feeling of shelter than in the open passage. "Steady, you do not know what's inside yet. I will go first." He went in cautiously, and the others filed behind. "There," he said, pointing with his staff to the middle of the floor. Before his feet they saw a large, round hole like the mouth of a well. Broken and rusty chains lay at the edge and trailed down into the black pit. Fragments of stone lay near. "One of you might have fallen in and still be wondering where you were going to strike the bottom," said Aragorn to Merry. "Let the guide go first while you have one." "This seems to have been a guard room made for watching of 3 passages," said Gimli. "That hole was plainly a well for the guard's use, covered with a stone lid, but the lid is broken. We must all take care in the dark." Pippin felt curiously attracted by the well, while the others were unrolling blankets and making beds against the walls of the chamber as far as possible from the hole in the floor. He crept to the edge and peered over. A chill air seemed to strike his face, rising from invisible depths. Moved by a sudden impulse, he groped for a loose stone and let it drop. He felt his heart beat many times before there was any sound. Then, far below, as if the stone had fallen into deep water in some cavernous place, there came a plunk, very distant, but magnified and repeated in the hollow shaft. "What's that?" cried Gandalf. He was relieved when Pippin confessed what he'd done, but he was angry, and Pippin could see it glinting in. He could see his eye glinting. "Fool of a toque," he growled. "This is a serious journey, not a hobbit walking party. Throw yourself in next time, and then you'll be no further nuisance. Now be quiet."
Dang!
It's a bit of an overreaction.
Seriously. I mean, they're young.
Yeah,
you know.
the hobbits are young.
Yeah.
All of them, right? Yeah, they're all pretty young.
I think so. And I think, Pippin and Merry, I think, are the youngest.
Yeah.
So they're not even, adult hobbits.
Yeah, the babies.
I'm just a baby.
Teen hobbits. Nothing more was heard for several minutes, but then there came out of the depths faint knocks. Tom tap, tap Tom. They stopped. And when the echoes had died away, they were repeated. Tap Tom, Tom tap, tap tap, Tom. They sounded disquietingly like signals of some sort, but after a while the knocking died away and was not heard again. "That was the sound of a hammer, or I have never heard one," said Gimli. "Yes," said Gandalf, "and I do not like it. It may have nothing to do with that Peregrine's foolish stone, but probably something has been disturbed that would have been better left quiet. Pray do nothing of that kind again. Let us hope that we shall get some rest without further trouble. You, Pippin, can go on first watch as a reward," he growled, as he rolled himself in the blanket. Pippin sat miserably by the door in the pitch dark, but he kept on turning round, fearing that some unknown thing would crawl up out of the well. He wished he could cover the hole, if only with a blanket, but he dared not move or go near it, even though Gandalf seemed to be asleep. Actually, Gandalf was awake, though lying still and silent.
Creeper.
He was deep in thought, trying to recall every memory of his former journey in the mines, and considering anxiously the next course that he should take. A false turn now might be disastrous. After an hour, he rose up and came over to Pippin. "Get into a corner and have a sleep, my lad," he said in a kindly tone. "You want to sleep, I expect. I cannot get a wink, so I may as well do the watching." "I know what is the matter with me," he muttered as he sat down by the door. "I need a smoke. I have not tasted it since the morning before the snowstorm." The last thing that Pippin saw as sleep took him was a dark glimpse of the old wizard huddled on the floor, shielding a glowing chip in his gnarled hands between his knees. The flicker for a moment showed his sharp nose and a puff of smoke.
It was Gandalf who roused them all from sleep. He had sat and watched all alone for about 6 hours and had let the others rest. "And in the watches I have made up my mind," he said. "I do not like the feel of the middle way, and I do not like the smell of the left-hand way. There is foul air down there, and I am no guide. I shall take the right-hand passage. It is time we begin to climb up again." For 8 dark hours, not counting 2 brief halts, they marched on, and they met no danger, and heard nothing, and saw nothing, but the faint gleam of the wizard's light, bobbing like the will-o'-wisp in front of them. The passage they had chosen wound steadily upwards. As far as they could judge, it went in great mounting curves, and as it rose, it grew loftier and wider. There were now no openings to other galleries or tunnels on either side, and the floor was level and sound, without pits or cracks. Evidently, they had struck what once had been an important road, and they went forward quicker than they had ever done on their first march. In this way, they advanced some 15 miles, measured in a direct line east, though they must have actually walked 20 miles or more. No, thank you.
In the dark.
I will say, if I'm walking, at least I assume the dark is cooler. Like the sun is not
temperature. Temperature.
Not like cooler.
Okay.
Like sunglasses.
I mean, it's really cool to be in the dark in the caves. No, I'm just thinking I don't like to do athletic activity in the sun in the heat.
That's fair.
That's
fair.
not-
I thought you meant it would be more fun to walk in the dark. And To that, I'm gonna have to disagree.
You don't think
probably
it's
be
fun to
worse.
like fumble around in the dark?
Listen, all three of us wear glasses. Nothing is
We're not making this
We
trip.
can't see in the daytime, guys. Come on now.
I always think about in a post-apocalyptic world.
Oh, I'm not
Like-
listening to Dave.
Like
No.
if your glasses break, like
Oh yeah,
It's
I'm
over.
done. I'm just gonna lay down.
As the road climbed upwards, Frodo's spirits rose a little, but he still felt oppressed, and still at times he heard, or had he thought, ahead behind the company and beyond the fall and patter of their feet, a following footstep that was not an echo. They had marched as far as the hobbits would endure without a rest, and all were thinking of a place where they could sleep, where suddenly the walls to the right and left vanished. They seemed to have passed through some arched doorway into a blank and empty space. There was a great draught of warmer air behind them, and before them the darkness was cold on their faces. They halted and crowded anxiously together. Gandalf seemed pleased. "I chose the right way," he said, "and as we are coming to habitable parts, I guess we are not far from the eastern side. But we are high up, a good deal higher than the Dimril Gate, unless I am mistaken. From the feeling of the air, we must be in a wide hall. I will now risk a little real light." He raised his staff, and for a brief instant there was a blaze like a flash of lightning. Great shadows sprang up and fled, and for a second they saw a vast roof far above their heads, upheld by mighty pillars hewn of stone. Before them and on either side stretched a huge empty hall. Its black walls, polished and smooth as glass, flashed and glittered. 3 other entrances they saw, dark black arches, one straight before them eastwards and one on either side. Then the light went out. "That is all I should venture on for the present," said Gandalf. "There used to be great windows up on the mountainside, and shafts leading out to the light in the upper reaches of the mines. I think we have reached them now, but it is night outside again, and we cannot tell until morning. If I am right, tomorrow we may actually see the morning peeping in, but in the meanwhile, we had better go no further. Let us rest if we can. Things have gone well so far, and the greater part of the dark road is over. But we are not through yet, and it is long down to the gates that open on the world." The company spent the night in the great cavernous hall, huddled close together in a corner to escape the drought. There seemed to be a steady inflow of chill air through the eastern archway. All about them as they lay hung the darkness, hollow and immense, and they were oppressed by the loneliness and the vastness of the dolphin halls, and endlessly branching stairs and passages. The wildest imaginings that dark rumor had ever suggested to the hobbits fell altogether short of the actual dread and wonder of Moria. "There must have been a mighty crowd of dwarves here at one time," said Sam, "and every one of them busier than badgers for 500 years to make all this, and most in hard rock too. What do they all do it for? They don't live in these darksome holes, surely." "These are not holes," said Gimli. "These are the realm and the city of Dwarradelf. And of old it is not darksome, but full of life and splendor, as it is remembered in our songs." He rose, standing in the dark, and began to chant in a deep voice. I always get the songs. All in the echoes ran into the roof.
That's why Jasmine was like, "On the second!"
The world was young, the mountains green. No stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were lain on steamer stone. When Durian woke and walked alone, he named the nameless hills and dells. He drank from untasted wells. He stooped and looked from mirror, and saw a crown of stars appear, as gems upon a silver thread above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before they fall, of mighty kings in Nargo throne, and Gondolin, who now beyond. The western seas had passed away. The world was fair in Durian's day. A king he was on cavern throne and many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor, and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon and shining lamps of crystal hue. Undimmed by clouds or shade of night, they're shone forever fair and bright. Their hammer on the anvils. I just can't read this cursive. That's what's hurting me.
Yes, the font is
The font is not a good font.
No. When I first saw it, I was like, I thought it was in a different language. Like, I thought it was all like in Elvish or something.
Wait, can y'all not read cursive?
No, it's just like the way it's printed on the page.
Oh, understood.
Yeah.
Understood. I gotcha.
Something about it, like my eyes.
Again,
like,
the glasses thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. But we're not making this journey. Like,
Again. Middle Earth, not for us.
Not for us. Their hammer on the anvil smote, their chisel clove and gravel wrote. Their forge was blade and bound was hilt, the delver mind the mason built. Their barrel pearl and opal pale, and metal wrought the fish's mail. Buckler and corsel, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Unwearied there were Durian folk, beneath the mountains music woke. The harpers harped, the minstrels sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang. I get these rhymes. The world is gray, the mountains old, the gorgeous fires ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammer falls, the darkness dwells in Durian's halls. The shadow lies upon this tomb in Moria in Khazad-dûm. Okay, thank you. But still the sunken stars appear, and dark and windless Mirror. There lies crown in water deep, till Durian wakes again from sleep. We made it. I like that.
Zoe Shakespeare over here.
I guess. I like that, said Sam. I should like to learn it. In Moria in Khazad-dûm. But it makes the darkness seem heavier. Thinking of all those lamps. Are those piles of jewels and gold lying around here still? Gimli was silent. Having sung his song, he would say no more. He's like, I just draw some fireballs. I'm not contributing any more to this conversation.
It's like, mic drop.
Piles of jewels, said Gandalf. No, the orcs have often plundered in Moria. There is nothing left in these upper halls, and since the dwarves fled, no one dares seek the shafts and treasures down in the deep places. They are drowned in water, or in shadow of fear. Then what do we do if the dwarves want to come back? Said Sam. For Minthrol, asked Gandalf. The wealth of Moria was not in gold and jewels, the toys of the dwarves not in iron their servant. Such things they found dear, it is true, especially iron. But they did not delve into all of them. All things that they desired to be obtained in traffic. For here along the world was found Moria silver, or true silver, as some called it. Minthrol is the elvish name. The dwarves have a name which they do not tell. Its worth was 10 times that of gold, and is now beyond price. For little is left above ground, and even the dwarfs dare not delve here for it. The loads lead away north towards Caradas, and down into the darkness. The dwarves tell no tale, and even though Minthrol was the foundation of their wealth, so also was its destruction. They delved too greedily and too deep, and disturbed that from what they fled, Durian's bane. Of what they brought to light, the orcs have gathered nearly all, and given in tribute to Sirion, who covets it. Minthrol. All folk desired it. It could be beaten like copper and polished like glass, and the dwarves could make of metal, light and yet harder than tempered steel. Its beauty was like that of common silver, but the beauty of Minthrol did not tarnish or grow dim. The elves dearly loved it, and among many uses it made of Enthrildil, Stardoom, which he saw upon its doors. Bilbo had a corselet of Minthrol rings that Thorin gave him. I wonder what has become of it, gathering dust in Michael delving mission? I don't know what that is. Delving Yatham House, I suppose. What? Cried Gimli, startled out of the silence. A corselet of Moria silver? That was a kingly gift. Yes, said Gandalf. I never told him, but it's worth his greater value of the whole Shire and everything in it. Roast. Frodo said nothing, but put his hand under his tunic and touched the rings of his mail shirt.
He's got it on.
He felt staggered to think that he had been walking around with the price of a shire underneath his jacket. Had Bilbo known? He felt no doubt that Bilbo knew quite well.
Bilbo's like, I can own this town.
That's
with my shirt.
That's the same shirt that Thorin gave him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was indeed a kingly gift, but now his thoughts had been carried away from the dark mines to Rivendell, to Bilbo, and to Bag End in the days where Bilbo was still there. He wished with all his heart he was back there, and in those days mowing the lawn or tottering among the flowers, and he had never heard of Moria or Mithril or the Ring. A deep silence fell. One by one, the others fell asleep. Frodo was on guard. It was as if a breath that came through the unseen doors out of deep places dread came over him. His hands were cold and his brow damp. He listened. All his mind was given to listening and nothing else for 2 slow hours, but he heard no sound, not even the imagined echo of footfall. His watch was nearly over when far off he guessed that the western archway stood. He fancied that he could see 2 pale points of light, almost like luminous eyes. He started. His head had nodded. I must have nearly fallen asleep on guard, he thought. I was on the edge of a dream. He stood up and he rubbed his eyes. He remained standing, peering into the dark, until he was relieved by Legolas. When he laid down, he quickly went to sleep, but it seemed to him that the dream went on. He heard whispers, and he saw that 2 pale points of light approaching slowly. He woke and found that others were speaking softly near him, and that a dim light was falling on his face. High above the eastern archway, through a shaft near the roof, came a long pale gleam, and across the hall, through a northern arch, light also glimmered faint and distantly. Frodo sat up. "Good morning," said Gandalf. "For morning it is again at last. I was right, you see. We are high up on the east side of Moria. Before today is over, we ought to find the great gates and see the waters of Miramur lying in the Dimril Dale before us." "I shall be glad," said Gimli. "I've looked on Moria, and it is very great, but it has become dark and dreadful, and we have found no sign of my kindred. I doubt now that Balin ever came here." After they had breakfast, Gandalf decided to go on again at once. "We are tired, but we shall rest better when we are outside," he said. "I think that none of us wish to spend another night in Moria." "No, indeed," said Boromir. "Which way should we take? Yonder eastward arch?" "Maybe," said Gandalf. "But I don't know yet exactly where we are, unless I am quite astray. I guess we are above and north of the great gates, and it may not be easy to find the right road down to them. The eastern arch will probably prove to be the way we must take, but before we make up our minds, we ought to look at us. Let us go towards the light in the north door. If we could find a window that would help, but I fear that the light only comes down in deep shafts." Following his lead, the company passed the northern arch. They found themselves in a wide corridor. As they went along it, the glimmer grew stronger, and they saw it came through the doorway on their right. It was high and flat-topped, and the stone door was still upon its hinges, standing half open. Beyond it was a large square chamber. It was dimly lit, but to their eyes, after so long a time in the dark, it seemed dazzlingly bright, and they blinked as they entered. Their feet disturbed a deep dust upon the floor, and stumbled among things lying in the doorway whose shapes they could not at first make out. The chamber was lit by the wide shaft high in the further eastern wall. It slanted upwards, and far above, a small square of patch of blue sky could be seen. The light of the shaft fell directly on a table in the middle of the room, a slight oblong block about 2 feet high, upon which it laid a great slab of white stone. "It looks like a tomb," muttered Frodo, and bent forwards with a curious sense of foreboding. To look more closely at it, Gandalf came quickly to his side. On the slab, ruins were deeply graven.
The slab.
Oh.
These are Daren's ruins. Such was of old use in Moria, said Gandalf. Here it is written in the tongues of men and dwarves. Balin, son of Fundin, Lord of Moria. "He is dead then," said Frodo. "I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face.
Aww. He's been gone this whole time.
Well, that was chapter 4. So they're in Moria.
Balin's dead.
Balin's dead. Who knows if our BFF pony Bill is alive or
Bill's
dead?
definitely dead.
All right.
Frodo's being haunted by something.
Oh,
followed
yeah.
By something. He's hearing something.
Never a good sign.
All
All right. If you missed this episode, want to watch it again, want to watch any of our other previous episodes, or can't make our Monday live shows, check out the Deerfield Public Library YouTube channel for all of our recordings. And join us next Monday at 1:30 for the continuation of the Fellowship of the Ring. And thanks for watching. I'm Christina.
I'm Jasmine.
I'm Zoe.
Bye.
Bye.